My name is Emily Ward, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about my thesis, The Alt-Right-Hand Path of Biopolitical Analysis of Yoga and Fascism. Maybe? Okay, so a lot of people ask me when they hear about my thesis topic, why yoga and fascism? What do these two things have to do with each other? And to illustrate why this is important, I'd like to introduce you to two very important people. The first is Francis Yates Brown. He was a British soldier in British occupied India. He wrote many books, novels about his adventures and exploits, one of which got turned into a film in the 40s. He also authored a book called Yoga Explained, and that's where this picture of him is taken from. And interestingly enough, he lists his heroes as Mohandas Gandhi, T.E. Lawrence, and Adolf Hitler. You can laugh. This woman here is Savitri Devi, born as Maximiani Portis. She converted to Hinduism after moving to India as a young adult, where she changed her name to Savitri Devi. And she believed that Hitler was an avatar of the Hindu god Vishnu. And she is the reason that we have esoteric Hitlerism and international Nazism to this day. So before I go any further, I want to say this is not an evaluation of authenticity of these fascist yogas. I'm not here to say what is real yoga and what is not real yoga. I do not think that is helpful in this context. This is also not a condemnation of all modern yoga. What this is an invitation to think critically and an attempt to raise awareness about a very real danger in our community. So there are a few factors that can contribute to the relationship between yoga and fascism, and for the sake of time, I won't be able to go into a ton of detail, but these are the categories we're going to be discussing today. They operate under similar logics. Due to how modern yoga developed, it has a lot of points of entry for fascist thinking, and they also have overlapping values, especially when it comes to discipline and purity. Also, it's important to define what the heck we're talking about when we're talking about yoga and fascism. Both are incredibly difficult to define, as everyone in here knows, for yoga. The definition that I'm utilizing comes from Novetzky and Kale's recent book, The Yoga of Power, not to be confused with Julius Evola's book by the same name. He was a very heavy fascist influence, in case you don't know. And they define yoga as a means, method, technique, or strategy by a subject to control an object in a shared field of power. Now, I like this definition because it's very broad and it highlights the fact that there is no definitive teleology or end goal to yoga. Yoga has been used for many different purposes over the centuries, but it has always been in relationship to power. For fascism, the definition I use is Roger Griffin's palingenetic ultranationalism, which is centered on the need to mobilize populist energies of renewal, or palingenesis, to bring about the rebirth of the ultranation. The ultranation is a group of people linked through some identity, whether national, cultural, religious, etc. And the central fascistic urge to instigate a rebirth is linked to a core myth of degeneracy. That means that the constituents of the ultranation have fallen from a previous golden age, signified by a decline in their power and purity. And declension narratives serve to galvanize disillusioned members of the populace, encouraging them to take action in promoting a return to greatness. Of course, the historical accuracy of these narratives is much less important than the mythos and pathos they provide. An example of a really common declension narrative or myth of degeneracy is the Aryan myth. Basically, the myth claims that the Aryans were this ancient race of noble people. They were the ancestors of high caste Indians and Europeans. They were fair-skinned warriors who invaded India, bringing with them horses, animal sacrifice, reverence of the cow, and Brahmin-controlled rituals. Over time, the Aryan race supposedly mixed with other races, which made them less powerful and needing purification. This myth was actually created from a linguistic discovery by this man, Friedrich Schlegel, in 1819. He noticed some commonalities between the German language and the Sanskrit language and realized that they had a common Proto-Indo-European language ancestor. So he made this linguistic discovery and immediately extrapolated from that. Was like, well, if we have the same language ancestor, we must have the same real person ancestor. And he made it racist. as is wont to do. What is interesting about this is that when this myth was really gaining popularity, and it was very popular, Germany was not quite Germany yet. So it existed as kind of a series of different nation states. And so what created the German ultranation to say was language. People were united by the German language. So that makes the power of this discovery all the more powerful. And Germany was able to use this as a nation, this myth in support of their nation building. It, of course, was adapted by Europeans and Americans more broadly, but also by Indian and Hindu nationalists who decided to turn it on its head against their British oppressors and say, hey, well, we're the actual descendants of the Aryans, so why are you, like, if you think they're so great, why are you doing this to us? And of course, the British were like, no, we're actually the real descendants. You guys messed it up somehow. But the important thing is that this is a declension narrative. Another key component of fascism is organicism, which links the health of the individual to the social body, so that they correspond. If the nation is weak, it is because the individuals within the nation are weak, and vice versa. Organicism aligns with Western harmonial influences on modern yoga. Harmonialism is a system of correspondences that culminates in the relationship between the universe as macrocosm and the human as microcosm, so a little world in the big world. Similar ideas can be found in Neo-Vedanta, which connect the individual self to Brahman. In fascist systems, the macrocosm is the ultranation rather than the universe, but the spiritual affect is just as strong. In both, the connection between the individual and the cosmos or the social body, the macrocosm, constitutes the field in which yoga is wielded. And that means that power over the body translates to power over realms beyond the body, whether they be spiritual, material, or political. This power is developed via yogic discipline or tapas, which we will discuss later. In addition to these logics, both modern yoga and fascism tend to embrace a sort of populist expertise, a term that describes, quote, the rejection of legacy media accounts, scientific consensus, or knowledge decried as elite in favor of a homegrown body of information generated and validated by those who may feel disenfranchised from mainstream political participation, end quote. Examples of this include modern-day wellness gurus who promote yoga as a part of their lifestyle branding and elevate bodily wisdom and intuitive ways of knowing as superior to abstract facts and knowledge. Anti-expertise and anti-intellectualism is prevalent in fascist attempts to rewrite history, appeal to alternative facts, and deem reports fake news. While intuitive epistemologies are not bad or wrong in and of themselves, populist expertise can promote dangerous misinformation, which we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic with treatments like drinking bleach or taking ivermectin. Modern yoga is a recent phenomenon that was heavily influenced by Western esotericism and by physical culture. We already discussed harmonialism, but related to that is New Thought, a movement that began in the late 19th century New England out of a dissatisfaction with mainstream Christianity. It emphasized the power of the mind over matter and the capacity of belief to shape reality. Gurus and swamis teaching early modern yoga in America in the late 1800s and early 1900s blended their own personal religious beliefs and practices with Western ideas that would be more palatable to their audiences, which drew from these types of countercultural movements. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, there was a divide between the meditative, philosophical, and ethical dimensions of yoga associated with Neo-Vedanta and the physical techniques associated with Hatha yoga. Postural yoga really did not become popular until after European gymnastics became more widely accepted, at least in Europe and the Americas, and when Europeans and Americans became more interested in exercise and physical culture. So what is physical culture? Physical culture rapidly spread throughout Germany, England, India, and the US, primarily from the 1880s through the 1930s, as nations sought to harness the biopower of their people through physical fitness. Biopower is the productive power of individual bodies and populations wielded by modern governments. Again, healthy individuals equal a healthy nation. The emphasis on the fitness of bodies was in part a reaction to the seismic cultural shifts that were happening at this time, including increased immigration, urbanization, industrialization. All of these stoked anxieties for folks who were used to the status quo around degeneration. The histories of physical culture, yoga, and fascism are deeply intertwined. Yoga scholar Mark Singleton has found that, quote, like modern yoga today, early physical culture was often based on a pronounced anti-intellectualism and a revalorization of the neglected parts of the triadic mind, body, spirit human model. It was not conceived as a merely mechanical pursuit of strength, but as a project to restore wholeness to individual and collective life, end quote. Physical culture's emphasis on restoration and regeneration made its adherents particularly open to fascistic narratives of decline and desire for rebirth, as well as eugenics. And pictured here, we have Eugen Sandow, not his birth name. He is the father of modern bodybuilding, and he purportedly chose the name Eugen as a tribute to the theory of eugenics. Postural yoga gained popularity against a backdrop of nationalism, organicism, and healthism. It is around this time we begin to see the first iterations of modern yoga studios and classes. Here we see Prunella Stack leading the British League of Women's Health and Beauty in 1939 in some yoga-inspired physical fitness exercises. Her mother did spend time in India and learned yoga in India, so just to know. These group exercises mimicked the regimented military exercises of nationalist and fascist entities in their uniform execution as a group, thus promoting microfascisms of conformity and standardization, as well as the macrofascism of the state biopolitical agenda. When I talk about biopolitics, I mean the means by which the state disciplines and manages both individual bodies and the population at large. Think again of organicism. Because of the internalization of state discipline and social conditioning, technologies of self-improvement, such as modern yoga, can become forms of biopower wielded by neoliberal governments for increasing the productivity of their citizens for the health of the economy. We become our own disciplinarians, upholding neoliberal values of incessant productivity, efficiency, and improvement. Self-disciplining, self-responsibilizing, and the socialized desire for the right kind of body are all forms of microfascism. Microfascisms are pervasive, individual, internalized fascist impulses born from psychosocial anxieties and a desire for control. They operate at the intra and interrelational levels, but their interactions contribute to fascism on a larger biopolitical scale. Yogic methodology, primarily tapas, which means heat, fire, penance, religious austerity, and mortification, is all about desire, discipline, and control. In the ancient Vedas, Brahminical rituals were performed as an exertion of human will to shape the universe. Over the centuries, the physical human body became the sacrificial site, as tapas evolved from a literal sacrificial fire to the fire of austerity. Yoga's emphasis on autonomy, responsibility, and discipline tie in with demitheurgic harmonialism and microfascism. Yoga is particularly susceptible to neoliberal and biopolitical self-responsibilization, a trend that continues now in the guise of healthism, which focuses on the behaviors of the individual, suggesting that people have direct control over their health, when in reality, health factors and outcomes are more often linked to environmental and socioeconomic factors. In this health equals wealth model of spirituality, physical ailments and diseases are symptomatic of spiritual blockages. One need only think positive thoughts or purify oneself to heal oneself. A logic popular in New Age and conspiracy and spirituality beliefs. It is in healthism and health education that we can see the intersection of biopolitics, yoga, neoliberalism, and fascism. Quote, health messages which reinforce the discipline and control of the body and which ascribe individual responsibility for health and illness promote microfascisms that regulate the body in particular ways, end quote. Although yoga is not institutionalized as a form of public health education, its popularity and its emphasis on self-discipline and self-mastery make it a useful substrate in which the interplay of neoliberalism and fascism can be observed. A lot of alt-right, whoops, forgot that one. A lot of alt-right fascist-leaning yoga today exists either in the esoteric lineages of people like Savitri Devi, or more commonly in the wellness industry, whose preoccupation with purity and cleanliness is one of the reasons wellness has become a gateway to far-right conspiracy theories. Fascism depends on purity and essentialized notions of identity. One must be a pure X in order to be a member of the X in-group, otherwise one is impure, an outcast. Modern yoga also emphasizes purity and purification in its harmonialism. One must be pure in order to connect to the universe. in its spiritual achievements and in its healthism. Black or white, essentialist thinking, or thinking that there is one right way to exist and act in the world, supports this type of purity culture and is a characteristic of white supremacy culture, which aligns with the fascist ideals thus far discussed. The realities of our current political climate and increasing reliance on populist expertise contribute to a cultic milieu in which fascist groupuscules actively recruit disillusioned members of society to their fascist and white supremacist ends. This happens all the time in yoga spaces, especially when practitioners and teachers try to keep yoga apolitical. It's an important reminder that being apolitical means you are siding with the systems of power and oppression. This happens closer to home than many of us would like to think. Many yoga teachers have supported RFK Jr.'s selection as the Secretary of Health and Human Services, thinking that his promotion of alternative medicines and his Make America Healthy Again, which is a declension narrative, campaign is a refreshing return to the basics of clean living, also a fascist dog whistle, when in reality, it is dangerous and fascist. Russell Brand, British comedian, actor, and alleged rapist turned spiritual and wellness guru, is a huge proponent of yoga, as you can see here, even having videos with the popular Yoga with Adriene, organic food, RFK Jr., and alt-right conspiracies about teen testosterone levels. He is pictured here at the Maha inaugural ball with Katie Allen, the founder of Be the Change Yoga, the organization which helps teach LMU's yoga therapy students. She is active on social media, trying to depoliticize Maha and yoga. But scholars and practitioners must grasp the potential harms of engaging with modern yoga in ways that are politically ignorant or even fascist. The yogic practice of viveka, or discernment, can help us identify fascist creep in our practices and beliefs, but there is a fine line between a healthy self-trust and an unhealthy self-delusion. So viveka must be applied using frameworks that allow for complex analysis of power, such as Foucault's biopolitics, which I glossed over today, but if you want to chat after, let me know. To be an anti-fascist yogi, one must be willing to confront difficult truths about one's practice and transnational yoga as a whole. Fascists believe in the superiority of their ultranation. They desire palingenesis to return to their rightful place at the top of the hierarchy. In their paternalism and authoritarianism, they believe they know what is best not only for themselves, but for the whole of humanity. They demand purity and perfection from individuals and the larger organic whole of society. Most yoga teachers would not admit that they subscribe to any of these beliefs, but the existence of so many yoga teachers in the wellness guru to alt-right pipeline and other fascist circles reveals how common these, perhaps unconscious to be fair, beliefs are in the field. The influences of nationalist physical culture, elitist esotericism, and a preoccupation with purity and discipline have created numerous points of entry for fascist thinking within modern yoga culture. When modern yogis do not actively use their yoga practice to combat these fascist influences, yoga readily becomes a tool for increasing or perpetuating the inequities that already exist within our society. At its most foundational, yoga is indeed a means for an end that must be determined by each practitioner. Hopefully, more yogis choose to walk the razor's edge of discernment and accept the challenge of embracing an actively anti-fascist yoga. Thank you.